My rich relatives turned their backs on me in my darkest hour, saying they couldn't spare the time or money, but now they're the ones begging for my help. And I've completely mastered the art of saying no. I woke up on a frigid December morning with the kind of numb dread that feels like it's seeped into your bones. The weak light of dawn crept through the threadbare curtains of my modest apartment, and even though the city's distant hum hinted at life continuing outside, inside, I was haunted by echoes of a painful past. Just last night, I'd received one of the most crushing phone calls of my life. A call from a relative, laden with dismissive words and the cold truth that in my darkest hour, no one in my family had cared enough to spare a dime or a minute. My name is Mia, and I'm 33 years old. I built my life from the ground up, working as a freelance marketing consultant and managing every penny of my existence with a determination that came from having been let down too many times. Growing up, I was always the dependable one, the person who quietly handled every crisis, who swept in to pay bills and fix problems without ever expecting praise. My rich relatives, on the other hand, lived in a world of effortless luxury. They had always taken for granted the endless sacrifices I made to keep their lavish lifestyles afloat. I remember countless family gatherings where I was expected to drop everything and handle a crisis, only to hear dismissive voices say, "We can't spare the time or money for you." It was at one fateful family dinner, when I needed support the most, that their true colors were revealed. In a moment that seared itself into my memory, my uncle accidentally recorded a conversation. The camera had captured my parents and siblings laughing, their voices dripping with disdain as they ridiculed me with callous comments. "She's a pathetic failure. And after all you do, you should be grateful." I'd been the one paying their bills, managing the chaos behind the scenes, and yet here I was, belittled as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. That video shattered any illusion I'd ever had about being valued by my own flesh and blood. I didn't react with angry words in that moment. I stayed silent, my heart breaking as the laughter echoed in my ears. Instead, I packed my few belongings in silence. I didn't shout or beg for explanations. I simply slipped away, leaving behind a home where my worth had always been measured solely by how much I could sacrifice. Even as I sat alone in the stark quiet of my apartment later that evening, nursing a bitter cup of cold coffee, I vowed that things had to change. I remembered every whispered insult and every time I was dismissed with a sneer. I realized then that I wasn't the problem. I was the one who'd been forced to give endlessly without ever being seen. In that moment, I promised myself I'd master the art of saying no. I'd reclaim my dignity, my self-worth, and ultimately, my power. I didn't know what the future would hold, but one truth had crystallized inside me. I was done being invisible. I was done letting my rich relatives dictate my life, even when I'd been the backbone of their financial stability for years. And as the bitter wind howled outside, I felt a spark of determination ignite within me, a promise that one day soon they'd all come crawling back, begging for the help they once so casually dismissed. That was when I knew my life was finally going to change. Looking back, my childhood had been a series of unspoken bargains. While other kids played and laughed, I was always left with the extra chores, the secret responsibility of ensuring everything ran smoothly at home. Birthday parties were never really mine. The spotlight always shone on my wealthy relatives, the ones who could afford to celebrate extravagantly. I remember the times when I'd slip quietly into the background, scrubbing floors or tidying up after a festive dinner, hoping that someone would notice my efforts. But no one ever did. Instead, compliments were reserved only for those who, by birth or luck, were deemed worthy of praise. As I grew older, the pattern became painfully clear. Every time I volunteered to help with the family's finances, every bill I paid, every account I balanced, it was seen as my duty, not as an act of love or appreciation. My parents, entrenched in their world of luxury and convenience, expected me to be the steady rock, the one who held everything together. I remember one winter when our heating system broke down, and while my relatives fretted over expensive repairs, I quietly set up a makeshift solution that kept us warm for weeks. Instead of gratitude, I was met with a dismissive remark. "That's just what you do." It was as if my efforts were woven into the fabric of my existence. Something so natural that they never even considered rewarding me. One rainy night, as I sat alone in my small, cluttered room, I rifled through old emails and text messages from family gatherings. I started collecting snippets of conversation that revealed a consistent pattern of neglect. I printed out every email praising someone else's achievements and every text message that casually dismissed my contributions. I even found a few recordings of family meetings where I was expected to just handle it, without any discussion of my own dreams or needs. Every document I saved was a painful reminder of how deeply undervalued I had been. That night, as the sound of rain tapped softly against the window, I vowed that I would no longer let my contributions be taken for granted. I began compiling a dossier, meticulously organizing photos, awards, and financial records that testified to my hard work and undeniable success. This wasn't about seeking revenge immediately. It was about acknowledging the truth of my own worth. I realized that while my rich relatives lived in a world of effortless luxury, I had built my own success through sweat and determination. And that truth was something no one could take away from me. It wasn't long before life delivered a blow that shook me to my core. During one of the darkest periods of my life, a time when I was grappling with a sudden health scare and mounting financial pressure, I reached out desperately to my family for help. I had always believed that when the chips were down, family would rally around you. That belief was brutally shattered. I remember the phone call vividly. My heart pounded as I dialed the number of my mother, hoping for a word of comfort. Instead, I was met with a cold, indifferent voice. "We're sorry, Mia, but we simply can't spare the time or money right now," she said matter-of-factly. My plea for help was dismissed without a trace of empathy. Even my uncle, who had always been a bit unpredictable, muttered, "You should have managed on your own," as if my suffering were just another inconvenience in their busy, opulent lives. The shock of that call left me reeling. I sat in my darkened room, tears streaming down my face as the reality of their callousness sunk in. All my years of hard work, every bill paid, every sacrifice made, seemed to vanish in the face of their indifference. That moment was the final straw. I realized that I had been nothing more than a free service to them, a tool to keep their extravagant lives running smoothly. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, and for the first time I felt the urge to say, "Enough is enough." That night, I stayed awake, replaying the conversation over and over in my mind. I felt a mix of anguish and a fierce spark of defiance. I knew that I couldn't continue living in the shadows of their indifference. The callous words had ignited a fire inside me, a fire that demanded justice, that sought to prove my worth once and for all. I resolved then that I would channel my pain into something powerful. I would document every slight, every dismissal, and use it as the ammunition for a future confrontation. This rejection wasn't just about one phone call. It was the culmination of years of neglect, and it was time for the tables to turn. In the weeks and months that followed my darkest hour, I threw myself into my work like never before. I realized that the only way to rise above the betrayal was to build something entirely my own. I dedicated long hours to my freelance projects, each campaign and marketing strategy a testament to my resilience and talent. Late nights spent poring over analytics, early mornings brainstorming creative ideas. Every minute was a step toward reclaiming my identity. I even enrolled in advanced courses to sharpen my skills, determined to prove not only to myself, but to the world, that I was more than the sum of their dismissive words. With every project I completed and every accolade I received, I felt a growing sense of pride. I started to see that saying no wasn't selfish at all. It was an act of self-respect. I began turning down additional family obligations, setting firm boundaries that I had never dared to enforce before. Each time I said no, I felt a surge of liberation, as if I were shedding layers of expectation that had weighed me down for years. I collected every award, every certificate, every thank you note from clients and mentors, and I compiled them into a portfolio that was entirely mine. This collection became my silent declaration. I had earned every success through hard work, and my worth was intrinsic, independent of their validation. I even started sharing bits of my journey on social media, a candid look at the struggles and triumphs of forging my own path. The responses were overwhelming. Strangers, many of whom had experienced similar neglect, reached out with words of encouragement. Their support reaffirmed my belief that I was not alone, that my story, painful as it was, resonated with many. As I began to master the art of saying no, I learned to cherish my own time and energy. I set clear priorities. My well-being, my career, and my dreams came first. Every refusal, every firm boundary was a reminder that I was reclaiming my life from a family that had long taken me for granted. It wasn't an easy path, but with each small victory, I grew stronger. I started to see my past not as a series of losses, but as the foundation of my newfound independence. And with that realization came a quiet, unyielding confidence. I would no longer let anyone dictate my value. Years passed, and the tides of fortune began to shift in the most unexpected ways. While I continued to build a life of success and independence, my once rich relatives started to face their own harsh realities. Their lavish lifestyles, long maintained through a series of carefully managed finances and preferential treatment, began to crumble. Rumors started circulating in our social circles. Whispers of failed investments, mounting debts, and a series of business setbacks that threatened to unravel their opulent facade. It wasn't long before the inevitable happened. One chilly afternoon, I received an urgent call from a cousin I rarely spoke to. "Mia, we're in trouble," he said, his voice trembling with anxiety. Apparently, one of the family businesses had collapsed, leaving a trail of unpaid bills and creditors at the door. Within days, the situation grew dire. Utility companies began issuing notices, and even the local bank sent stern warnings about overdue payments. The irony was as thick as the winter fog outside. Those who had once dismissed my pleas and scorned my efforts were now scrambling for help. At first, I couldn't believe it. The very relatives who had once turned their backs on me, who had laughed at my struggles, were now begging for my expertise. Phone calls poured in, each one a desperate plea for financial guidance and support. "You're the only one who can fix this, Mia," one relative insisted. "We need you," they repeated, as if my mere presence could reverse years of mismanagement. I felt a complex swirl of emotions: anger, disbelief, and a cold satisfaction that I'd finally been given the power to dictate the terms of our relationship. The tables had turned, and suddenly, the ones who had once considered me a burden were now relying on me to save their crumbling empire. This reversal was both ironic and deeply painful. I remembered every moment of neglect, every unappreciated effort, and it all came flooding back as I listened to their frantic calls. But even as I absorbed this twist of fate, I knew that I had mastered the art of saying no. I was no longer the one who would simply foot the bill, no matter how dire the circumstances. Instead, I began to plan my response. I spent hours reviewing my dossier, every piece of evidence that had once fueled my silent rage, and I drafted a plan to confront this reversal head-on. I would not allow my past sacrifices to be exploited for their benefit. If they wanted my help, they would have to earn it. And that set the stage for the final confrontation, the moment when I would finally force my rich relatives to confront the consequences of their lifelong indifference. The turning point came on a bitterly cold winter evening during a family reunion that was called under the guise of crisis management. The old mansion, once a symbol of our family's glitzy tradition, now reeked of desperation and disarray. Relatives gathered in the grand living room, their faces etched with worry and regret. It was here that my rich relatives, now desperate and humbled, pleaded for my help. As the conversation reached its fever pitch, I stood up in the center of the room, my voice steady and resolute. "I've heard your pleas," I began, glancing around at the anxious faces. "For years, I was the one who kept this family afloat, paying bills and handling crises without a thank you. And now, when you're drowning in your own mess, you're here, begging for the help you once refused to offer me." My words, delivered with a calm that belied the storm inside me, resonated through the room. I unfolded the dossier I had meticulously compiled, copies of bills, screenshots of overdue notices, and records of every time I silently sacrificed my own needs for the sake of this family. "This evidence," I said, "is not just proof of my hard work. It's a testament to the years of neglect that you inflicted on me. I was considered expendable, And now you're on your knees expecting me to bail you out. Murmurs of disbelief filled the room, as even those who had once supported the old ways began to question the justice of it all. My uncle, whose casual disregard had once shocked me, now looked down with shame. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she attempted to justify her actions with a shaky "here. We did what we thought was best." But I wasn't finished. "I refuse to be your safety net any longer," I declared. "I have built my life on my own terms, and if you want my help, you'll have to learn to respect my worth." The tension was palpable. Every face in the room reflected the gravity of my words, the irreversible shift in power. The confrontation spiraled into an outpouring of raw emotion. I recounted painful memories that had festered over the years. A birthday when I spent the day cleaning up while everyone celebrated, a school award ceremony where my achievements were ignored, and countless moments when my hard work was met with indifference or scorn. My voice, shaking with fury and sorrow, filled the room as I declared, "I am not the person you once thought I was. I am more than your financial crutch. I am a person with dreams, with ambitions, and with a future that is entirely my own." As I spoke, I could see the shock in the eyes of my relatives. One by one, even those who had once joined in the ridicule began to show signs of regret. An aunt, normally so silent, whispered, "I always knew you deserved better." Her quiet admission was a spark that set off a chain reaction. Others began to murmur in agreement, and for a moment, the oppressive atmosphere shifted. The reality of my contributions, my scholarship, my professional accolades, and my personal sacrifices was laid bare, forcing everyone to confront the truth they had long denied. I continued with a fervor that seemed to electrify the room. "I spent years paying your bills, keeping your world running smoothly, all while you dismissed me as a failure. Today I say enough is enough." My words, imbued with a mix of bitter truth and hopeful defiance, cut through the silence like a clarion call. In that charged moment, I realized that the path to true liberation was through owning every scar, every tear, and every hard-fought victory. The raw emotion was a testament not to revenge, but to a deep, unyielding resolve to never again be treated as invisible. At the peak of the confrontation, the room seemed to hold its breath. I took one final, decisive step. With all the evidence spread before us, a mosaic of my life's struggle and triumph, I made my ultimate declaration. "I am done being your unpaid labor, your secret supporter, your pathetic failure. I will no longer allow you to dictate my worth. From this day forward I say no, and that no is final." The words reverberated in the silence that followed, a powerful declaration of independence. I performed a symbolic act that would forever mark this moment. I gathered the family photos, the mementos of every holiday where I had been taken for granted, and gently set them aside as if to signal that I was leaving that part of my life behind. "These memories," I said softly, "are not worth the price I've paid." The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. Even Brittany's defiant sneer faltered as she struggled to grasp the magnitude of my transformation. I looked around, meeting each pair of eyes with unwavering conviction. I built my life on hard work, on self-respect, and on the unyielding belief that I deserve more. And if you expect my help, you must first learn to value me as I value myself. In that moment, the air was thick with the weight of change. The power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. No longer was I the invisible one, but the force that now determined the terms. It was a defining stand, the culmination of years of silent suffering transformed into a resounding declaration of self-worth. As the final echoes of my declaration faded, the atmosphere in the room shifted into an uneasy silence. The confrontation had left the family scattered in shock. Some relatives began to weep quietly, while others muttered apologies that were half-formed and uncertain. Even my mother, once so unyielding, now wore an expression of remorse that spoke of long-buried regret. The old order had crumbled before my eyes. I retreated to a quiet corner of the house, where I sat for what felt like an eternity, absorbing the full impact of the fallout. Every face, every whispered conversation, and every tear was a testament to the fact that I had finally forced them to confront the consequences of their years of neglect. I listened as phone calls rang out with news of financial troubles, the unpaid bills, the warnings from creditors, and I knew that my relatives' world was beginning to unravel. Despite the chaos, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I had reclaimed my voice. I had forced a reckoning. In that moment of raw vulnerability, I realized that true change would be slow and painful, but it had already begun. The family that once dismissed me was now forced to face the reality of their actions. And as I stepped outside into the cold night, the crisp air filled me with a profound sense of liberation. I wasn't sure if they would ever truly understand, but I knew that I had finally broken free from their chains. In the days that followed that explosive confrontation, I set about rebuilding my life, this time on my own terms. I left the suffocating old house behind and moved into a small sunlit apartment in a vibrant part of the city where creativity and independence thrived. Here, I began to reassemble my identity piece by piece, embracing every success, every small victory that reminded me of my intrinsic worth. I immersed myself in my work as a freelance marketing consultant, channeling the pain of the past into bold, innovative projects that earned praise and recognition. Every new client, every contract became a building block for a future that I controlled. I took on projects that excited me, and I forged connections with colleagues who respected my ideas and celebrated my independence. My professional life began to flourish, and I realized that the journey of self-reclamation was not just about rejecting the old, but about embracing the new. I also started to redefine my personal life. I reconnected with a few close friends who had always believed in me, and I made new ones. People who valued authenticity and mutual respect. I learned to set boundaries with those who once demanded my constant attention without appreciation. I discovered that saying no was not an act of defiance, but one of self-preservation. Each day, I grew more confident in the knowledge that my worth was not dependent on the approval of my estranged relatives. Slowly, I began to craft a new holiday tradition for myself, one that celebrated my journey rather than the empty expectations of a family that had once spurned me. I hosted small, intimate gatherings with friends who supported me, creating an atmosphere of genuine warmth and appreciation. The laughter that filled my new apartment was a stark contrast to the cold indifference of my old life. Every day, I reaffirmed that my success was my own, built on hard work and unwavering self-respect. Now, as I sit by the window of my new apartment on a bright spring morning, I reflect on the tumultuous path that brought me here. The memories of a time when my rich relatives turned their backs on me in my darkest hour still linger, but they no longer define my existence. Instead, they serve as reminders of the strength and resilience that I discovered within myself. Every rejection, every hurtful comment, every unappreciated effort has molded me into the determined, independent person I am today. I have learned that true self-worth isn't something bestowed by others. It's something you forge through your own perseverance and courage. My journey from being treated as an expendable burden to becoming a confident individual who masters the art of saying no is a testament to the transformative power of self-respect. I now know that I deserve love, success, and happiness, not as gifts from others, but as rights that I claim through my actions and beliefs. Looking ahead, I have a clear vision for my future. I plan to continue advancing in my career, to take on challenges that push my creative boundaries, and to build relationships based on genuine respect and understanding. I aspire to use my story as a beacon for anyone who's ever felt undervalued or dismissed. I want to show that it's possible to rise above the bitterness of neglect and build a life where your worth is acknowledged, where you're not defined by the shallow expectations of others, but by the strength that lies within. As I prepare for each new day, I carry with me the lessons of my past. I remember the cold words of my relatives, the pain of silence, and the transformative moment when I finally said no. Those memories, once sources of heartache, are now the fuel that drives me forward. They remind me that every challenge, every hardship, is an opportunity to assert my independence and to build a future that truly belongs to me. I close my journal each night with gratitude. For the struggle that made me strong, for the victories that have proven my worth, and for the unwavering belief that I can shape my own destiny. And as the sun sets over the city, painting the sky with hues of hope and renewal, I smile, knowing that I am finally free. Free to live my life, free to say no, and free to celebrate my worth every single day. This is my story, a journey from being dismissed as a burden to becoming the master of my own destiny. And if you've ever felt that the world has overlooked your value, know that your worth is defined not by the judgments of others, but by the fire that burns within you. In reclaiming my life, I have found not only freedom, but the courage to inspire others to do the same. As I step into the future with open arms and a heart unburdened by old expectations, I am reminded that true power comes from within. I have mastered the art of saying no, and in doing so I have opened the door to endless possibilities, a future where my worth is celebrated, my voice is heard, and my dreams are mine to pursue. And that, ultimately, is the most profound victory of all.